My name is Loretta Hayes, and at 57 years old, I never imagined I'd become the woman who turned a wedding reception into front-page news across Charlotte. But life has a way of forcing your hand when the people you love most are about to walk into a trap lined with gold and lies. It started quietly, the way most disasters do. My son Caleb, my only child, my heart walking around on two legs, met Emily Caldwell at a charity 5K in Dilworth. He was 31, a high school history teacher at Myers Park High, the kind of man who stayed late to help kids with college essays and coached JV soccer for free. Emily was 29, beautiful in that effortless Southern way, long auburn hair, soft laugh, eyes that sparkled when she talked about teaching third grade. They fell hard and fast. Within a year, they were engaged. I liked Emily immediately. She was kind, grounded, the sort of woman who hugged you like she meant it and asked about your day without waiting for the answer to be short. But her family? That was another story. Preston Caldwell was old Charlotte money, or at least that's what everyone thought. His grandfather had founded Caldwell Savings and Loan back in the 50s, and Preston had turned it into a regional bank chain before selling out to a bigger player and pivoting into fintech consulting. He owned a sprawling house on Providence Road, belonged to the most exclusive country club in the city, and carried himself like a man who'd never known a no in his life. His wife, Margaret, was polite but distant, always dressed in pastel Chanel and speaking in soft, measured tones. They had two daughters, Emily, the baby, and an older one named Victoria who lived in Atlanta and rarely came home. From the first family dinner at their house, a Georgian-style mansion with columns and a fountain out front, Preston sized Caleb up like he was appraising a used car. History teacher, huh? Noble profession. Low pay though. Emily's used to a certain standard. He said it with a chuckle, as if it were a joke we were all in on. Caleb smiled politely. I gripped my fork tighter. Over the months of wedding planning, the condescension grew. Preston insisted on paying for everything. It's tradition for the bride's family, he said, and chose the Palisades Country Club for the reception because it's where all the right people get married. Caleb wanted to contribute, even offered to cover the flowers or the band. Preston waved him off. Son, don't worry about it. You focus on teaching. The word always landed like a subtle slap. I watched my boy shrink a little each time. Caleb had grown up in a modest duplex off Central Avenue after his father left when he was 8. We'd scraped by on my salary driving a school bus and later working nights at a diner. Caleb never complained. He mowed lawns, tutored kids, got scholarships. He was proud of what he'd built. But Preston's casual dismissals chipped away at that pride. Then came the signs something was wrong. It was a Tuesday in early spring. I was at the Harris Teeter on Providence, picking up groceries for Caleb's birthday dinner, when I overheard two women in the produce aisle. One was a former teller at Caldwell Bank who'd retired early. Preston's in hot water, she whispered to her friend. FDIC's sniffing around those low-income loan programs he ran. Word is he pocketed kickbacks from dealerships, steered people into bad loans, got a cut on the cars they bought with the money. My niece lost her house because of one of those subprime deals. I froze behind the apples. Kickbacks? Embezzlement? I thought of the families in my old neighborhood, hard-working folks who'd trusted Coldwell savings when the big banks wouldn't touch them. Many had lost everything in the crash. If Preston had profited off that, I didn't say anything that night. But the seed was planted. Over the next months, I started paying attention. I drove past the bank branches that had closed. I read old news articles about Coldwell's aggressive lending in underserved communities. Then, one Saturday, Caleb mentioned Preston bragging at golf about creative financing that let him help more people than the regulators ever could. Emily rolled her eyes, but I filed it away. The rail break came from my neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Torres. She'd worked as a loan processor at Coldwell for 15 years before quitting in disgust. We were both in our yards one afternoon. She was watering azaleas, I was pulling weeds, when she waved me over. "Loretta, you hear about Preston Coldwell?" she asked quietly. "Bits and pieces. He's dirty. I saw the files before I left. He diverted funds from the community reinvestment programs. Money meant for loan forgiveness in low-income areas. Pocketed it through shell companies. And the car dealership thing. He'd get referrals, take a percentage under the table. FDIC's building a case, but it's quiet. They don't want to spook him." She hesitated. "I kept copies. Emails, transfer records, memos. I was scared to use them. But if your boy's marrying into that family..." She gave me a USB drive that night. I spent 3 sleepless weeks cross-referencing everything: bank statements, emails, even a voicemail Preston left a dealership owner bragging about our little arrangement. The evidence was damning. Preston wasn't just arrogant. He was a criminal who'd built his empire on the backs of people like the ones I'd grown up with. I didn't tell Caleb. He was so in love, so hopeful. Emily was innocent. She believed her father was a good man who'd made mistakes but meant well. I couldn't shatter that yet. But I prepared. I made copies of everything. I wrote letters, one for Caleb, one for Emily, one for Margaret. I kept them in my purse like grenades. The wedding day arrived on a perfect October Saturday. The ceremony was at Myers Park Presbyterian, elegant, traditional, white roses everywhere. Caleb looked handsome in his navy suit, eyes shining as Emily walked down the aisle on Preston's arm. Preston wore a custom tux, gold cufflinks glinting, smiling like he'd won something. The reception at the Palisades Country Club was breathtaking. The clubhouse overlooked rolling fairways and Lake Wylie in the distance. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, centerpieces of orchids and candles. Over 200 guests, bankers, politicians, old money families. My side was smaller, cousins from Gastonia, a few teacher friends, my sister from Raleigh. We looked out of place in our off-the-rack dresses and rented suits, but Caleb didn't care. He danced with Emily like the world was perfect. Dinner passed, filet mignon, lobster bisque, speeches from the best man and maid of honor. Then the toasts. The MC handed the microphone to Preston. He stood, glass raised, the room quieting. Good evening, everyone. What a joy to see my little girl so happy. Emily has always had the best taste in most things. Light laughter. He turned to Caleb. Caleb's a fine young man. Dedicated. Blue-collar heart. I respect that. But let's be honest. My daughter is used to a certain lifestyle. The kind that doesn't come from grading papers and coaching soccer. More chuckles, uncomfortable now. Caleb's smile faltered. Emily squeezed his hand. Preston continued, voice smooth. Caleb, I hope you know what you're getting into. Keeping up with a Caldwell woman isn't for the faint of wallet. He raised his glass higher. To the happy couple, and to Caleb, who'll need all the luck he can get. The room laughed politely. Some clapped. I felt heat rise in my chest. Caleb stared at his plate, jaw tight. Emily looked mortified. I stood. The movement was slow, deliberate. Heads turned. Preston's eyes narrowed as I walked toward the stage. My legs shook, but my voice didn't. Excuse me, I said, taking the microphone from the stand. The room went silent. Loretta. Preston said, half laughing. This isn't. My name is Loretta Hayes. I'm Caleb's mother. I looked out at the sea of faces. A few minutes ago, Mr. Caldwell called my son inadequate. In front of his bride, his family, all of you. He implied my boy isn't good enough because he doesn't have money. I paused. But money isn't everything. Integrity is. And Mr. Caldwell, you have none. Gasps. Preston stepped forward. This is outrageous. I held up a hand. I have proof. I pulled the USB from my purse and nodded to the AV tech. A young man Caleb knew from school who'd set up the sound. I'd tipped him $20 earlier and asked him to be ready. He plugged it in. The big screen behind the head table flickered to life. First came the emails. Preston directing subordinates to reallocate community reinvestment funds to personal accounts. Then bank transfers, hundreds of thousands siphoned to shell companies. Then the voicemail, played loud and clear. Listen, the referral fee on that last batch of auto loans was clean. Just make sure the paperwork shows consulting. FDIC won't look twice if we keep it under the radar. The room erupted. Phones came out. People whispered. Margaret Caldwell stood, hand over her mouth. Emily stared at her father like she'd never seen him before. Preston lunged for the tech. Turn it off. But it was too late. I'd already emailed copies to the local news station, the Charlotte Observer, and the FDIC regional office, scheduled to send if I didn't stop them by midnight. I turned back to the microphone. Preston Caldwell has embezzled from programs meant to help low-income families. He's taken kickbacks from car dealerships, steering vulnerable people into predatory loans. Families lost homes, savings, futures, because of him. I looked at Caleb, tears in his eyes. Son, I didn't want to do this today. But I couldn't let him humiliate you. Not again. Not ever. I set the microphone down. The room dissolved into chaos. Guests argued. Some left. Preston tried to shout explanations. This is fabricated. She's lying. But no one listened. Emily ran to her mother. Caleb stood frozen. I walked to him, hugged him tight. I'm sorry, baby. But you deserve better than lies. He didn't hug back right away. When he did, it was stiff. Mom, why now? Because love protects, even when it hurts. The night ended in fragments. Margaret left with her sisters. Emily disappeared with friends. Preston vanished. Later I learned he drove straight to his lawyer's office. Caleb and I sat in the empty ballroom amid wilting flowers and half-eaten cake. He looked at me, voice raw. You destroyed everything. No, I said. He did. Years ago. Caleb left without another word. The fallout came fast. The next morning, the Observer ran the story. Prominent Charlotte banker accused of fraud at daughter's wedding. Video from guests' phones went viral. The FDIC confirmed an active investigation. Within days, class action suits poured in from families who'd lost homes to Caldwell's loans. The car dealerships were raided. Preston's assets froze. Caleb didn't speak to me for weeks. He moved in with a friend. Emily broke off contact too, at first. The wedding was annulled quietly. I spent those months alone, questioning everything. Had I gone too far? Was the truth worth this pain? Then, 3 months later, Emily called. We met at a coffee shop in Noda. She looked exhausted but resolute. I left home, she said. Mom's filing for divorce. Victoria's helping her. Dad. He's fighting the charges, but the evidence is overwhelming. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a thank you card. You saved me from marrying into a lie, she wrote. And you saved my mom too. We cried together. She told me Caleb was hurting but asking about me. 6 months later, Caleb showed up at my door. He looked thinner, tired. Mom, he said. I was angry. I thought you'd ruined my life. I thought I had too, I admitted. But you didn't. You saved it. He hugged me, long tight. Emily and I. We're talking again. Slowly. She wants to rebuild. Without him. They did. A year later, they married quietly in a small chapel downtown. No country club. Just family, friends, barbecue at my house afterward. I danced with my son to an old Motown song. Emily hugged me and whispered, "Thank you for being brave." Preston was convicted 2 years later. Embezzlement, fraud, money laundering. 15 years. He served in a federal prison upstate. Last I heard, he was sick alone. Emily and Caleb bought a little house in Plaza Midwood. He still teaches. She still teaches. They have a daughter now, Loretta Grace. When she was born, Emily asked me to be in the delivery room. Holding that baby, I felt the weight lift. All the pain, the silence, the nights I'd cried alone. It had led here. 5 years after that wedding, I'm 62. Caleb and Emily are thriving. Little Loretta calls me Gamma and asks for stories. I tell her the truth. Sometimes love means standing up, even when it's hard. Even when it breaks your heart. Because truth doesn't just expose lies. It rebuilds what's real. And what's real is worth everything.